CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success. Hey, this was recorded at Streamline Asset Management User Conference, Greenville, South Carolina. You're about to meet Phillip Bragg. He is pre-sales manager at Hexagon EAM, and we're going to pick this conversation up talking about his transition from military into civilian life.
Various maintenance management jobs. And so when I came out, when I retired and I was looking at what I'm going to do, when I grow up, and it was kind of an interesting transition. It was a little bit different than what I've been doing, but I knew I wanted to go into sales, and so I transitioned from a military career into sales, and then I moved into pre-sales, and it's really been an interesting journey.
So, is it? I think I know the answer, but I want to ask anyway because somebody's going to be learning from this. And when it comes to that transition and the fact that you were around maintenance and reliability and that type of stuff, how much does that really level you up in pre-sales in your ability to assess and figure out what to craft out for each unique client environment that you're, selling into, you're trying to solve their problem? How much does that play a role, and kind of give us a little coloring around that?
Yeah, absolutely. And, people come from a lot of different areas, but coming from where I came from, I'm a big believer in it's all about the person conducting the maintenance or the operations. You have to really think about it from that standpoint. And one of my sayings is, big data, AI, all those things are awesome. But those are all built on small data. And small data comes from people actually standing there in front of equipment, tired, hot, sweaty, dirty, and entering the stuff in there. So if you don't think about that, if you don't have that piece of the puzzle solved, none of the other stuff will work. So that's kind of the way I approach it. Like, how do we make this usable, adaptable? How are we going to get the people in the field who not just use it, but want to use it? So that's kind of the way I kind of approach a lot of the stuff that I do.
Yeah, that's so what's interesting kind of like about that is that's kind of the nuanced part that a lot of this kind of shiny stuff and, this is going to solve all your problems approach when it comes to technology, whether it's the software or the sensors or any of those things, all good stuff if used properly. Right. But if you don't have those general elements in place, you're already cooked out of the gate, right?
Yeah, technology we have now is amazing. And the thing is, the issue is never, can the technology do what I need it to do? That is never the problem. The problem is, how can I get my organization to embrace this technology and use it in the way that it was designed to use? It's really a change management organizational perspective, more than a technology perspective. And so for us in pre-sales, part of what we do is try to help customers imagine what it's going to be like to use this product as they move forward in their maintenance journey.
So do you have any examples that you can comfortably share about when you ran into those situations, whether it was in pre-sales, and it sounds like you're actually pretty involved post-sales sometimes, like when somebody, hey, what was that thing? What was that we were talking about? But where you got a lot of resistance, and then can you share a strategy on how that kind of got back on track?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of aspects to that. One thing I would say is that a lot of it has to do with the project design and the way that your implementation partner implements the product. I think that's one of the great things here. We have all these different implementers here that do implement EAM. It's not just when you're coming to buy Hexagon EAM, it's not just, hey, can you Hexagon Services does it. We have a whole ecosystem. So part of the challenge is matching up, like, based off the type of industry and then the challenges that they're facing, making sure that they're aligned with the appropriate partner that can help them through that. Sometimes that will be Hexagon, sometimes that will be from our partner network.
Quick question about that. So say, for example, they're in wastewater management or energy or oil and gas,
right,
or producing these widgets. The various partners that are here at this particular Streamline event are kind of savvy in some of those areas, maybe some of them are all those areas, but that's where you get that alignment during kind of the initial engagement, and pre-sales is involved in that as well, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a lot of times we can help be the trusted advisor, because we can say, look, based off of your industry and the challenges you're particularly facing, it's not just the industry, it's the size of the organization. There's other factors. We say, hey, why don't you go talk to these guys? Why don't you talk to these guys and really help them find the right partner? It's not just us saying, hey, here's what it is, here's how you got to do it.
Right.
We give them options, and they can explore that and make sure they're making the right choice.
So essentially, it's pulling from that network of partners,
right. Exactly.
Getting the right alignment, but the customer has a lot of input on that.
They do, yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's their decision. That's one of the great things about our ecosystem, is that we can really give them options, and they can pick the partner that best fits their needs.
Can they come back to you and say, hey, we kind of like that, but there's a couple of things we're concerned about, and then they can kind of pull you back in to kind of help out if maybe there's a renegotiation, or hey, there's a misunderstanding on this part of the whole deal?
Yeah, I mean, there's always options. One of the things is we have our own services inside of Hexagon, and they're really good at certain things. So it's not unusual for there to be partnerships where we'll say, hey, you're going to prime on this company's going to sub on it. They're going to focus on this areas. We're going to focus on those areas. We can set up arrangements like that if they're appropriate as well.
What do you think? So far, based on all of your experiences, what do you think is the biggest barrier to adoption when it comes to maintenance teams, let's say on the plant floor, or it could be different environments, but where the frontline workforce, what do you think is the biggest barrier to adoption when it comes to looking at the Hexagon platform? Is there anything that kind of pops into mind, and how do you solve it?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple things. One is a lot of times when we've seen they're not getting input from the frontline workers when they're implementing the application. So when it comes to when the boots meet the ground, it's not really meeting the needs of the person on the ground, right? So ultimately, when they pick up the device or they look at the screen, like, it has to work for them. And if you don't do that properly in your planning phases, it's not going to look that way. So obviously, you're going to get every single human being is against change, right? So you got to make it more or easier for that person to change, and by listening to them and making sure they're involved in the implementation process, then now you're getting buy-in early on in the phase. The second thing I think is training. Training is always difficult. Companies don't have a lot of time. They don't have a lot of resources. So making sure that they, in addition to bringing in the software, that they include in their budget plenty of budget for training as well. Because if you don't get the training done, you're going to spend all this money on the software, all this money on implementation, and then that last mile, that 110%, you don't budget for training, and now all of a sudden you've got all this stuff, but your people don't really know how to use it. They haven't been properly trained. They're not going to use it. And then the third thing is you got to have somebody in your organization who's the true believer, right? Because
champion.
You got to have a champion. And we've seen time and time again that when people use the technology, they will come on to the side, but you've got to get it into their hands. You got to have people that are believers in the organization that can push it. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be the leader. It could be somebody in the middle, even somebody on the shop floor who's a true believer.
I think we've both seen it countless times, and it's important. And that person, if they exist, should be embraced. I think another thing I would add is organizations, when they're leveraging the platform, they have that champion. They should create their own internal documentation system as far as how and why we're doing this. Create some kind of internal case studies, because if that person somehow leaves or goes away, that's a real risk factor for all the adoption that's been done so far to fall away. And we've got other things as it relates to, leadership changing out, parachuting in, making all their changes. Do you think when we follow philosophies around training the trainers at the client organization are good, or do you think it's a little bit more pie in the sky? I've always been a fan of it if you can create that core group, but what are your experiences there?
Yeah, no, that's definitely what you need to do. And I think one of the beauties or powers of EAM is that it's so easy to configure that if you do build the right group of core EAM experts in your organization, you can do a lot of the change over time that's going to happen in your business. No business is static. whatever you put the system in today, a month from now, you're going to need to make changes, right? And if you can get the right people in the right positions, like that change can be done internally. You don't have to call a consultant in. You don't have to call an expert in. We can teach you how to do that. We want you to give, I tell people, give you the keys of the castle, right? We don't want to come back every 6 months to have to show you how to build a report or to change a field or to change a work process. We can show you how to do that, and then you can do it yourself.
Right. Now, do you have any current trends? Like, I know right now there's a lot going on with APM. And I wonder, which trends are you not just excited about, but are there any that you're concerned about in the industry? Not necessarily with the software, but things that, maybe people are missing, they continue to miss. Anything like that comes to mind?
Well, I mean, obviously the APM is I think, a really great next step for specific types of maintenance strategies. One thing I like to tell people is we talk about the maintenance journey. We're going from basic to more advanced, but I always like to tell people, like, that's not all your assets, right? You have to, I think the best organizations are very measured about the maintenance strategies they apply to different types of assets, right? Yeah. I mean, running it till it breaks is a valid strategy for a lot of stuff, right? Yeah. You don't want to put APM on everything, but for the things that are absolutely critical in your organization, that capability is amazing. I mean, obviously everybody talks about AI. We're putting AI in the product, but I personally think that at this point, maybe it's being oversold a little bit. There are limitations to AI. Particularly in our business where a wrong answer can be critical failure, right? And one of the big challenges with AI is, like, it really doesn't know anything, right? It's just putting out information, and a lot of times it's wrong. That's great if you're getting restaurant recommendations, not a big deal. But if you're telling me, like, how to change my maintenance strategy on a particular piece of equipment and you're wrong, that's a significant risk for my business. Yeah. So you got to be really, really cautious about that. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the two that I think about a lot right now that I'm thinking about.
I have to say, I'm glad that you said it in that way, because that's one of my concerns, and I talk to a lot of people, obviously, and that's their concern as well, because what is it, AI, whatever you want to think of it, it's machine learning, it's programmatic in nature. What is it being fed? What is it being taught? Right. And rather than having it just going out, pulling random things, there's great ways to leverage it. I know of some, companies out there that are really building it slowly and properly. They're bringing in the right kind of experts like CMRPs and true practitioners to guide it on how to actually help you optimize PM schedules. But it's not, you have to maintain that as well.
Right, that's another program you have to maintain.
There really are not many things that are set it and forget it. And that's the other thing I wanted to kind of close out with is that the best advice for someone is don't sleep on the fact that you need to keep an eye on, audit, and manage these processes once you've got them implemented as well. Otherwise, you run that risk of all the work, all the money just turning into an exercise in futility.
Yeah. We see it's not uncommon for us to go to a customer that's been a long-time customer, and they call us up and they say, hey, can you come down and take a look at our system? We don't think we're getting value out of it. And we go down there, and that, everybody that was there when it was implemented, purchased, put in, they're all gone. New people are in. They don't really even know how the product works or what it's supposed to do with them. And for me as a vendor, that's very frustrating, right? We want every single customer to get the maximum value out of the product we sell you, because there's so much value there. So I guess going back to your point, you got to make sure that, EAM is just not, you just don't throw it in there, right? It has to be a part of your business, right? It has to be a process that is constantly evolving and being evaluated as you move forward. Otherwise, when people leave, it's just going to die on the vine, and you've wasted all that money, you've wasted all that data you've collected, and you're getting nowhere.
Good stuff, and that's calling it real. I really first want to thank you, Phil, for being with me here on CMMS Radio. We are at Streamline Asset Management User Conference, and Hexagon is the primary sponsor of this event. I want to thank you for that as well, because we all get to hang out here, collaborate, even if it's at one of the events at night where we're socializing, tell a lot of kind of war stories and learn stuff. And thanks again for being here with me, man.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you.
Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.